Hey, everybody. I'm really happy to have a chat with my old buddy, Isaac Shapiro. We've known each other for pretty much 30 years, right, Isaac?
True,
Back
yeah.
to Papaji's living room in the early 90s. And yeah, we've been through a lot of fun times. We've lived together. We've had our kids around each other, and it's great to hang out. There's a time difference right now. I'm in the middle of the afternoon, you're in the morning, but it's great to be with you as always.
Thank you, Arjuna. Yeah, this is Arjuna, and everything he says is true. We've explored together, and we have a rare connection where we actually invite each other to feedback and to listening to each other, and that's rare and valuable in my world. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, brother. I love you so much. We were talking a little before, we were talking about, this kind of balance right now of vulnerability and being sensitive to the human hurts and wounds, but also balancing that with really stepping up to meet the challenges of the times, and we were talking a little bit, let's just pick that conversation up a little bit. And I think I'd love to just hear again from you what you were saying about you were reflecting upon how easily, I think you could say, the pain body gets activated. That would be the kind of Eckhart Tolle way of saying it.
Yeah, sure. Just speaking for myself and noticing with as much exploration that I've done, how quickly an activation can happen that feels hurt and just wants to go to war, so to speak. And I'm grateful that it doesn't go so on into automatic anymore as it used to at one point in my life. But it's tricky territory in all of us. I think it's like we can have seen very deeply, but still there can be a lot of information that hasn't been properly digested. I'm curious how you see that, or how you.
Yeah. Well, I'd be glad to answer that. And before I do answer that, I want to just share with you an observation, because you and I, not only we lived with Papaji back in the 90s, but I think we were both, on different occasions, we were both requested by him to teach. Is that correct?
Yeah. Although I heard it, the way I heard it was being available to people who have this interest. So I didn't take it as teaching. I just took it as
okay. Well, yeah. In my case, it was even more weird. What he did with me is he actually didn't say anything to me. He said a bunch of stuff to his Indian friends in Hindi, right? So to Reena Nanda and Om Prakash, all these people, he said in Hindi, he said, Arjuna will go back to America and become a satsang teacher, but he never said anything to me. So it all got fed back to me, exaggerated by his Indian friends. It was all a kind of setup, So finally, I actually went to see him one day, and I said, "Hey, Papaji," he was sitting alone in his on his tucket there, that wooden platform. He was sitting there, and I said, "Hey, I've been hearing something about teaching," and he said, and I said he said, "Yeah, you go teach." And I said to him, "You must be joking, right?" Because I had seen a couple of people, names not to be mentioned, one male, one female, who had both gone off to teach, and they had developed this kind of war with each other, right? Public war with each other, right? And so I had listened to these recordings of this man and this woman, each at war with each other. I thought, oh my God, that's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down. So I thought, I don't want to be a teacher, right? So when he said, go and teach, I said, you must be joking. And I remember he said to me, yes, he said, the truth is a great joke. Go share it with as many people as possible, right? Anyway, there's more to that story. But what I wanted just to share with you is that not only were you and I in Lucknow with him, but we both of us, directly or indirectly, were shunted off to go teach. And there were other people, whether they were asked by him or otherwise, a number of other people became teachers. And what I have noticed is that many times when people become teachers or get the kind of G at the end of their name, you go from kind of John to John G, right? I've often wondered, actually, just as a quick aside, if there was an Italian who went to India and his name was Gigi, because that is an Italian name, would that person become Gigi? But anyway,
Sri
Gigi. And then an American could go to satsang with Gigi and say, gee, that's Gigi. But anyway, enough of that. So I was thinking that we both got to teach, right? We both became teachers. And actually, you made a statement, one of the most poignant, powerful statements that I've ever heard about spiritual teachers. And I think you said this. And the statement is, and it's really quotable, I've quoted it many times, the clearer you become, the more you believe your own bullshit.
It's true.
You said that. Yeah. Anyway, so, it's once you get to be a teacher and people start listening to you, it is incredibly difficult, I think, to stay sensitive to your own reactivity. And when you do feel upset or insulted, it's very easy to take the upper position and say, oh, it's all you. So I just want to really acknowledge you. Seriously, I want to give you like a lifetime achievement award right now for remaining vulnerable to your own reactivity, even after you've been teaching so long. It must be more than 25 years now. It's just beautiful to see that you remain connected with your own reactivity. It's rare,
So two things from my side is like, I've never actually regarded myself as a teacher. I really see myself as an invitation. And so, that changed the whole conversation for me, because it feels like my function is just to point people at what they know, what they've always known, but has been hidden by the way the mind and the nervous system functions. So I don't really have anything to teach. It's more like an invitation. The second thing is, as funny as it sounds, like the reactivity that happens when I've explored it, it's like I can see it doesn't belong to me, or it doesn't belong to anybody. It just belongs to consciousness. And what that has enabled is being able to explore it without blaming myself and without shaming myself. So those are two things that have been key for me. I mean, and again, it's one of those things that in exploring has shown itself.
Yeah, man. I didn't really answer your question yet. You were asking about this thing, and you were asking me about my experience of it. And this has always felt to me, actually, kind of an inherent conundrum, like in other words, an unsolvable paradox. That in this kind of great awakening, this great opening that happened with Papaji, with our mutual teacher, there is this recognition, that actually what I really am is this space. And yes, there are these thoughts and feelings dancing, but they're just thoughts and feelings dancing. What's really real is the space. And then if you find yourself in a place with people to issue an invitation to enter the space is all that is real, right? So that's there. But the mechanics of being being centralized, localized inside a human monkey is that the temptation to take this personally and to say, the space is there, therefore I am the space, because there's an invitation happening, therefore I am somehow, is very strong. And once we do that, it creates a kind of specialness, And so this is actually I find a tricky bridge to maneuver, that the space is there, but simultaneously the absurdity and the brokenness of the monkey personality is also there, and they coexist. And they kind of coexist, but they're not like really separate from each other. They kind of merge in and out of each other. So I've actually been through a number of transitions with this, and I'll keep this short so we can get back into, dialoguing on it. But the first transition that happened for me was fairly early on in 95, that I switched from teaching to training coaches, right? So basically, I shifted from giving satsang as the teacher to training people to be facilitators of awakening. So I found I could actually guide people in how to ask the right questions of each other so they would guide each other into awakening. And that was beautiful. And that lasted for a long time, actually, for 20 years, until 2015. But then there was another shift happened for me that I realized, and I'm just speaking purely subjectively, but the focus on enlightenment or spiritual development or even healing, or the focus on me and my state in some way kept it me-centered. Even if we're talking about quotes enlightenment or whatever, where there is no referencing of a me, still the interest in a state or keeps it me-centered. So I found it became much more interesting and attractive to me to work with people who are primarily interested in being of service rather than being enlightened, So I kind of shifted from being a spiritual teacher to a coach, coaching entrepreneurs and leaders, and that actually has proven to be much more intriguing and interesting, because the kind, you could say the focus, the reason for doing this is to become the best version of yourself so that you can make a contribution, where awakening to the infinite is part of that, but not the central part of it. So that's some of the way that I've bridged this for myself, is finding myself now in service to leadership seems to where the contribution is more central than some kind of spiritual advancement. It seems to me, just for me anyway, it falls into place more, What do you think?
So, yeah. So, I mean, to me, it seems like in that recognition, and if we're around, and everybody is in that moment just resting as that space, as that awareness, there is no problem, there is no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But then how does it get lived?
Yeah.
You move from that, from that clearness, absolutely there's nothing going on, and you move into intimate relating or parenting or business and then life starts to look through everything that's undigested, all the old traumas, all the ancestral traumas, everything. And so the capacity then to embody or to live it is very limited, even though there might be a high recognition, but the capacity to actually live it. So, that's been really interesting for me. And to me, just to bring it around to the second thing that you spoke of service, it's like, again, at the risk of sounding like I'm preaching or talking, it's like, to me, there's three paths. There's the path of jnana, the path of knowledge, knowing who you are. And that's not considered a path because it's considered direct. Then there's the path of love. And usually that's focusing on a so-called enlightened being and being in love with them so that and then there's the path of service, seva. Those three traditional paths, yeah. So, and it was interesting because Papaji said to me one time, it takes two wings on a bird to fly, both love and knowing who you are. And Nisargadatta put it, and maybe I'm misunderstanding both of them, but my understanding, Nisargadatta said, when I know I'm nothing, that's wisdom. When I know I'm everything, that's love. And between those, my life flows. And that touches me so deeply, because it's like, wow, okay. So then, in the moment when we're resting with each other, resting as awareness, being present to all the little movements that go on that usually we don't see because we're so used to to seeing through those filters. And when we rest together, those actually have a chance to start to come into view without any words even. It's just like, sitting there, and then these, what usually is not seen because of the speed of which we're moving, or the habits of them, the momentum of the habits start to come into view. And to me, that is the greatest service, actually. Just to be available for that. So that's how I see service. It's like, quite often in my groups, I'll ask people, how many of you have a sense that we all participating in each other's well-being in this moment by just simply being here? And usually it's everybody. So how do we move forward where we start to bring this inquiry into our moment by moment, our day to day? And you said something interesting to me, which was this thing of a teacher puts themselves out of the feedback loop. In other words, the collective intelligence of the field of who you're with isn't available to you.
I think you said that actually a few minutes, like half an hour ago. You commented about people you mentioned
being out of the feedback loop. Yeah, but I said but now I'm just bringing it back that as soon as we regard ourselves as a teacher, then we,
I see.
There's something to be defended.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, okay, wow, we all in this together, man.
Yeah.
And the patterns that play in us usually are automatic and unconscious, which literally means that nobody's doing them. And there's no choice. And there's no choice when it's automatic and unconscious.
Yeah.
But the moment they become conscious, wow, then inquiry can happen.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I feel like I'd like to, in our playful wrestling together.
I see it as an exploration. I honestly do. I see.
So do I, man. I was just jiving with you. Yeah.
Yeah. We're in love with the same thing,
man. It's But listen, I wanted to offer you a little playful pushback for a moment, because you talked about, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but you talked about the path of jnana, right? Which you said is not really a path because it's direct. Path of love, path of service, right? But when we talk about path, right, it implies a path is going somewhere, right? And that's valid. That's a valid, and what I've noticed in these traditions that are imported from the Orient, which are hot countries, which lend themselves towards passivity, the implied path is some form of liberation, right? In other words, enlightenment, freedom from identification with the personal, some kind of universal, vroom, and when that vroom is complete enough, boom, game over, right? So there is an implied, when we talk about three paths, there is an implied destination, right? And I have taken it upon myself, just because I'm a curious motherfucker, to actually question that implication of liberation as the central binding element. So what I did, So what I did.
I want to bring a quick something in here.
No, let me finish my thing, because I was very patient.
Okay.
Go on.
Okay.
So I didn't interrupt. So let me finish this thought. So I did a little reverse engineering for this last book that I did, Radical Brilliance, where I actually interviewed a lot of people who appear to be extremely fulfilled people, right? And I would count you among this, but I interviewed people who really appear to be very much at peace, but very alive, so that you get the sense when they die one day, it's going to be there's going to be a sigh of complete satisfaction. So I interviewed Lynn Twist, I interviewed Daniel Schmachtenberger, a bunch of people who really seem to be like fully alive and fully resting, to find out what was the central binding element. In other words, I didn't ask it this way, but to intuit what is really the purpose of life. What is that makes life meaningful? And what I discovered, if I really wiped the slate clean and didn't make any assumptions, it actually wasn't liberation, it was contribution. Right. So I'm paraphrasing here, but when I've done like hundreds of interviews now like this. I've discovered for myself anyway, what I recognize as the central thing that causes life to be meaningful, it's contribution. Now, just one more thing, and then I'll hand back to you. But if we actually recognize contribution as the key to fulfillment, that you're here on this planet, not to be free of being here on this planet, you're here on this planet to give your gift. And when you fully discharge your gift, you have fulfilled your purpose in incarnating, right? So if you take that as a hypothesis for a moment, then in fact, the whole thing flips around, that awakening is one of the components that is in service to contribution. So awakening is a component, creative flow is a component, accomplishment and being able to manifest things in the world is a component, and self-reflection and learning is a component. So like that, what I'm saying is that awakening is one of the components of contribution, instead of contribution being one of the paths to awakening. So I've experienced a kind of flip around. You see what I mean? That rather than saying there are 3 paths to awakening, one of them is service, I would say, no, there are several components to a life of contribution, and one of the components is awakening. Okay, now I'm done, and tell me what you think.
Well, one of my last visits to Lucknow, I looked at Papaji and I was blown away because, he was the most expanded person I'd ever had the good fortune to meet. And suddenly when I was looking at him, it seemed to me like there had been a tremendous acceleration. And I said, Papaji, I'm not sure if it's just my eyes but it seems like there's been a huge deepening in you. And he looked at me and he says, of course it's deepening, otherwise it would be limited. And so to me, it wasn't about a path. It wasn't about getting anywhere, but more a recognition that this love affair, I don't know if it has an ending. I honestly don't know. All I know in my own experience is that it keeps deepening. So that's how I would describe it, from just, that conversation and also my own experience. And the second thing of service, I have looked at that very deeply, and it might be a slightly different perspective than yours. I know that how I would describe it is we love to participate in each other's lives in a way that's beautiful. So we can call that service, or we can call that, and again, for me, it's just, we've had this passion. I've been looking, what we have to give each other is our attention. And when I look, I see that what we give attention to and how we give it makes a huge difference. So for me, it's like, if I'm sitting with you and I want to make a contribution to you, it's very different than receiving you. And in a way where there's a felt sense that I'm participating, or that the way we're participating with each other is bringing each other more alive, more conscious. And so then in retrospect, we can say, yes, there was a contribution, but it doesn't come from that place of trying to make a contribution. It's an expression of love. So a different twist on it, just kind of where it's gone, and me in exploring, because I think we're looking at the phenomenon of being human in the context of knowing who we are. And
I noticed as we're talking together, I noticed that we're using these things called words, words.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, words, it seems like words are very precise things, but they're not, because words are like, I don't know, words carry so many associations and connotations which are not the same for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So when I hear the word service,
Mm.
it smacks to me of a kind of spiritual world. You know, it's like, you know, service. Oh, I'm gonna be, I mean, so if I'm thinking back on some of the amazing people I've had the privilege to know so far in my life, you know, who have just blown me away with their combination of aliveness, genius, humor, humility, you know, all of it, right? And you would be one of them, bro. You know, I mean, really, you know, you're one of the best kissers I know, basically, you know.
Oh, sweetheart.
but we kiss with we kiss not with our tongues, but we kiss with our attention. Yeah. No, I'm just so I'm thinking, like, if I was to think about the amazing people, and I feel really blessed. I think, you know, the greatest luck that I've had in my life was to just be around incredible people. Sometimes it happened through luck, and sometimes it happened just through being pernicious and pushy. But I'm thinking about, like, Leonard Cohen. You know, I got to hang out, I got to be friends with Leonard Cohen when he was alive, which is really like an incredible, awesome, amazing thing. And Leonard is one of those people who had this incredible mixture of, like, on fire, like he was unstoppable. Because I mean, you know, he's known for these albums, but he was also writing poetry. He wrote novels. He was doing art on his iPad, you know, that then got, I mean, he's just like unstoppable, you know, and he was incredibly funny and just all around extraordinary human, just lit up like, wow. When I mean, it's like, when you were with him, you walked away feeling like, oh my God, that is possible in human life. It's so much more than, and to me, honestly, so much more impressive than any spiritual teacher I've ever met in my whole life. So much more, like somebody with G at the end of the name, I'll go like, okay, you know, Leonard Cohen, I'll go, oh my God, you know, just like so fucking inspiring, you know? And I wouldn't say he lived a life of service exactly. You wouldn't say.
Exactly.
Now, hang on. He lived a life of fully discharging the contribution he was born to give, you know? And that, to me, it's like, that kind of sums it up. Like Lynn Twist, I guess that is kind of service because it's Pachamama Alliance and it's a .org, but then lately, you know, I seem to have this weird thing that whatever musician I most admire at any one time, I somehow magically get to be friends with. So I was friends with Leonard Cohen. Leonard died. Almost immediately that Leonard died, I got to be friends with Alex Ebert, who's the founder of Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. So you know, I've been to stay with him in New Orleans. We hang out, and he's the same. I mean, Alex, he's an imperfect guy. He's kind of can be a bit neurotic and scattered, but fully on fire, like, you know, just like, just every day, like squeezing the juice fully, you know. And that's what I'm really talking about. I think we have to use the language carefully. I'm hearing a ringing. Are you hearing that?
I'm hearing it too, and it sounds like I'm not sure if the smoke alarm here or what it is.
Huh.
Right. It's like maybe Michael will take care of it.
Hope so. Hope so.
Hope
your house isn't burning down.
I don't smell smoke. I just said that sound out stopped. Good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's how I've gone about this. I've looked for, like, another one, for example, is Alan Ball, right? Alan Ball wrote the screenplay for American Beauty, which in my humble experience is the most enlightened film ever made in all of history. You know, it's just like beyond, it's beyond brilliant. It's just, it expresses this out of the box, you know, kind of loving, detached view of human existence just brilliantly, you know, without ever preaching in any way. It's just immaculately brilliant. But Alan Ball, when I talked to him, it didn't seem like he was being of service. It seemed like he was fully giving his gift with passion. And this is perhaps a very subjective evaluation, but that's what turns me on. When I see that, it's not pious, it's not preaching, it's not holy, it's just on fire, alive, and it burns with innocence and genius and connection And, you know, that's what basically gives me a hard on, you know, and,
I understand. And
yeah.
I'm curious whether those people would even regard it that they were giving their gift. My sense is they just in a flow of something that
Yeah.
is pure passion.
Yeah.
And then if it gets received as a gift or not, it may be or it may not be.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's not within the context of giving a gift. It's just that passion using itself, using its an expression.
Yeah.
So
can I add a piece?
Yeah.
Because, you know, what I've noticed is, and I've done my best to approach this investigation without prejudice, right? So back in 2002, personally, I started to reject the idea of enlightenment as bogus, right? That there isn't a thing called enlightenment. There is a kind of enlightening that can happen in any moment, but some kind of permanent state where now you're enlightened, that just seems to be inviting disaster, you know, because people get on their little pedestal for a while and fall off.
To me too, it's like, it's a concept.
Right, exactly.
It's a construct.
So that was back in 2002. But, you know, since then, I've just tried to really look at this outside the box, you know. But so looking at it as empirically as I can, and of course I do have prejudice, it seems to me whenever anyone somehow magically gets into this fully alive self-expression, like Barbara Marx Hubbard was another one, for example, awakening is absolutely a component of that person's life. They have to have a way of connecting with the infinite. And sometimes it happens through spiritual practice, and then that rips a hole in the veil through which light can come, or their contribution becomes their way of ripping a veil. It could go either way, in other words. But it seems like awakening is an essential component of contribution. But when we make our life about awakening and develop a spiritual life with spiritual beliefs, it doesn't seem like contribution is an inevitable byproduct at all. We can easily become pious and preaching and serious.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
I'm not saying you are, but it can happen.
No. To me, I'm seeing with this, you know, if we really look carefully, what is awakening?
Yeah.
Or what is it? I mean, to me, it's a recognition of who you've always been.
Yeah.
So it's like I was once interviewed and someone asked me, when did you awaken? And I'd never considered the question.
Now.
And I said, you know, actually, I never woke up.
Yeah.
There was a seeing that happened in which I realized that which we were seeing had always been awake.
Nice.
There was no me that awoke.
Right. Great. Which means actually, in a funny way, nobody is other than awake. They may or may not realize it, but nobody is other than awake, because if sounds are being heard, that which is awake is hearing them, right? It may not be recognized fully, but nevertheless, you know? Yeah.
And then, you know, like for me, it's like this thing of the dance in a way. If I look at Ramana's invitation, it was this who am I wasn't an intellectual question. It was a question to bring your attention back to that space.
Right.
And that's who, you know, that nature, our nature.
Yeah.
And so that is, you know, Atma Vichar. That's the jnana, that consistent. But then there were a bunch of concepts around that threw me, which was, you know, like vigilance. And I found that when I was looking through the filter of vigilance, it took effort.
Yeah.
But there's a natural noticing that happens that's part of a love affair that has a completely different quality to vigilance. It's just like noticing when activation happens, and then, you know, vulnerability and honesty about it and all that stuff. That's completely different than vigilance.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, having to find my own language for this, you know, all the different concepts that I came across, and then trying to find, you know, an entrance point into, okay, what's actually true here? Like, you know, there can be that deep seeing, and there can be like a, like an ongoing interest in that seeing to the point where it's like really clear that that's our nature. And still that sense of I can become a reference point. It's like but then looking deeply into what is that sense of I see that literally it's a referencing mechanism. It's like it goes, when that referencing mechanism stops, either through Alzheimer's or going to deep sleep, there is no I.
Mm.
What is it? It's like this activity of what's going on, what do I think about it, what do I feel about it, and all that. That's that activity that is that sense of I. If that stops, there's only space here.
Right.
But that referencing mechanism is how life as human functions in order to, where's the toilet? What's going on?
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not who we are, even though it produces a sense of me. But then deeper still than that, there's like, I was speaking about these little movements that happen. We hear, there's just the information of now, and then something in us goes into resistance to the sensations of the moment. And that movement produces a sense of disease, which then activates a thinking process which tries to solve what appears to be the problem. And then, consciousness is looking through all of that. So whether that, it's like, yeah.
So one thing I'm noticing, bro, as you speak, I noticed you use several Indian words just now, and you reference Ramana, who lived in the south of India, who he's sitting right now in my office up on the wall there. Let me see if we can, there he is. Oh no, you can't see him because of the light. But anyway, he's behind the light. Let's see if we can anyway, so in India, they have this term dharma, right? Which means, and it says in Upanishads, every being lives their dharma. They can't help it, right? And so in India, they had these 4 kind of kinds of dharma. There's Brahmin, Kshatriya, blah, 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 But equally, that's within India, which is a certain climate and everything. So it seems to me like the awakening that we're describing, it has a kind of ground of being to it, like the recognition of infinite consciousness and recognition of being that. But how that manifests is going to be according to the disposition of the dharma of the incarnate individual, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So one interesting thing you can see already is you're referencing an articulation of dharma that originated in South India, where it is hotter than hell. And you can't do very much because it's really hot. Now, meanwhile, go north to Kashmir, where the climate's very different, and you get Kashmiri Shaivism, right? Which gave birth to the Vigyan Bhairav Tantra, Shiva's teachings to Parvati, but also gave birth to the Spandarika, I think that's how you say it, the teachings of Spanda, right? And what they talk about in Kashmiri Shaivism is there's this ground of being, but it's not just still, it's actually vibrating. It's naturally vibrating on its own. And if the human nervous system kind of relaxes into surrender to the vibration, they talk about that there's this movement that happens through Spanda where the body starts to actually, you can practice it, you can let the body be taken over by the Spanda. And that's just a function of going 1,000 miles north, or maybe less, a few hundred miles north from the south of India to the north. You get a whole different way of expressing this. Now, what happens if we go even further north into Europe or America, where you've got a different climate and a different disposition? Because it seems to me that this is just my view, the dharma of Western people, born in a colder climate, right, where there's not that kind of, it's too hot to do anything. It seems to me the dharma is not actually, the reason that we're alive is not just to do with the resting. It's to do with the allowing of it to play through us and fulfill its play through this incarnate life, which means, you know, to me, Alan Ball, who wrote American Beauty, was just as much of a spiritual warrior as Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi did his thing in South India in blistering heat, and that's what he could do because it's really hot, right? Alan Ball, living in Los Angeles, did his dharma his way, you know, and then Daniel Schmachtenberg, who's a great intellect, does. So it just, and what I'm suggesting is, it seems to me that some human lives, they're more predisposed towards exploring beingness. Some human lives are more predisposed to allowing that beingness to warm up and to express itself through music, like Leonard Cohen, through, you know, who lived in Montreal, colder than hell, you know, so there was like, you had to keep moving, right? So, and I know that for me, I mean, you and I maybe are a little different in our disposition. For me, I know that my life is not about keeping still. You know, that I need elements of that. I would go back crazy. You know, I sit every morning with a blindfold for an hour observing, but I know that my contribution, I can feel my contribution is to do with shaking things up, giving expression, like allowing it to create through me, you know, so that it's not really me anymore. It's the spanda, you know? So I'm just postulating that it seems like the way that this expresses in human life is actually very different. And I think it's important to not see South India as a template. That's how everybody should be living.
I don't at all.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, to bring it into Western conversation, what I've noticed is that our life, you know, like different interests in my life have come and gone. You know, as a boy, maybe you were into collecting, you know, soccer cards or baseball or whatever, and then there's interest, passionate, and then they just disappear. So
except for the girls, that one's hard to shake off, right?
Yeah, well, it can be, you know. For some people it would be boys, or some it would be both, but whatever.
But you've kept a pretty lifelong interest in the girls, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And actually, it's more than girls. It's more in meeting deeply, and and the beauty that happens in that meeting. But so to me, it seems like these different interests come at different stages of our lives. And so then I was questioning really deeply, am I in charge of my interests, or do they happen by themselves? Do they leave by themselves? Can I, and what I can see is that interests come and they go, and that my life happens within the context of my interest. And then that kind of goes in alignment with what Western science is finding, is that decisions and choices, we don't make them, they happen before, and then we become conscious of them.
Yeah.
So that fits with my own sense of life. And it's like, so if passion comes when interest comes, and it lives itself through us. And somehow, for some of us, this interest in how consciousness functions, how to be in life in a way that's beautiful, or that's making, whatever words you want to use, making a contribution, happens. And our life happens within that context. And, you know, I can't really take credit for it, because I see that I had nothing actually to do with it. It's just like, it happens, and I'm grateful. And what's happening in me at the moment is I'm getting hungry. It's breakfast.
Man. Yeah, sweet. It's been fun, bro. I mean, we could go on forever. I'm sure there's nobody listening by now. Probably, you know, whatever people started watching this video have given up a long time ago. It's just you and me on our own. Anyway, two old guys. You know?
No worries. You know, if you could send me a copy, I'll post it on my Facebook, and also on my website. Because to me, it's a beautiful conversation.
I love you, bro.
I value it.
Yeah, I love you. I'll see you soon, okay?
Big love.